Most people believe retirement is the reward at the end of the road, a finish line, a moment where everything finally slows down and feels secure. But after watching hundreds of people cross that line, I've learned something most never expect. Retirement isn't defined by what you finally have. It's defined by what you were wise enough to release before you got there. I've seen two people retire with nearly identical savings, similar pensions, and the same access to Social Security. One moves through retirement calm, adaptable, and confident. The other feels tense, boxed in, and constantly worried that the math won't hold. The difference is rarely income. It's almost always decisions made years earlier. Retirement doesn't punish people who didn't earn enough. It punishes people who held on to the wrong things for too long. Today, I want to walk you through the first of 5 things you should seriously consider selling or consciously letting go of before retirement. Not because these things are bad, but because timing matters in life just as much as it does in investing. This isn't about fear, it's about clarity. And clarity may be the most valuable asset you can carry into retirement. 1. The home that no longer fits your real life. For many people, the family home represents far more than square footage. It represents decades of effort, sacrifice, stability, proof that you did what you were supposed to do. And that deserves respect. But respect can quietly turn into attachment. And attachment, when it's no longer aligned with reality, can become expensive. A home is only an asset if it supports the life you're living now, not the life you lived 20 years ago. I've met countless retirees living in large multi-bedroom houses filled with empty rooms they rarely enter. They're paying property taxes, insurance, heating, cooling, maintenance, and constant repairs for space that no longer serves a purpose. When you ask why they stay, the answer is almost always emotional. We might need the space when the grandkids visit. But the grandkids come twice a year, for 3 days at a time. Let me share a real example. I once knew a couple living outside Chicago who kept their 3,200 square foot home for 7 years after their youngest child left for college. The house was beautiful. It was also quietly draining them. Their annual property taxes alone were around $14,000. Once you added insurance, utilities, lawn care, snow removal, and the inevitable repairs, they were spending close to $30,000 per year just to maintain a home they barely used. At the same time, they were anxious about cash flow. They hesitated to travel because they worried about leaving the house empty. They postponed medical procedures because they weren't sure they could comfortably afford them. All while sitting on nearly $450,000 of trapped equity. When they finally sold and moved into a thoughtfully designed townhome closer to their daughter, everything changed. Their annual housing costs dropped to about $18,000. They invested the released equity, creating new income. But more importantly, they stopped worrying about gutters, furnaces, and yard work. They stopped managing a house and started living a life. Selling a home at the right time before health issues, mobility challenges, or market pressure force your hand puts you back in control. It allows you to choose simplicity instead of reacting to necessity. This doesn't mean downsizing just to save money. It means choosing a home that supports ease.
Fewer stairs, closer access to healthcare, lower fixed costs, less maintenance. Maybe that's a condo near restaurants and medical services. Maybe it's a single-level home in a warmer climate. Maybe it's relocating closer to adult children to reduce travel and strengthen family connections. The specific choice doesn't matter as much as the intention behind it. I've also seen people dramatically improve both finances and well-being by moving to states with lower taxes, reduced cost of living, and climates that place less strain on their health. Action step: Pretend you're buying your retirement home today with fresh eyes. Write down the 5 features you truly need for the next 20 years of life. Then compare that list honestly with the home you live in now. If they don't match, it may be time to sell while you still have flexibility and choice. 2. Investments that rely on luck instead of understanding. I've always believed that real risk doesn't come from markets, it comes from not knowing what you own. That belief doesn't change in retirement, but the consequences do. When you're young, time forgives mistakes. If you're 35 and a stock drops 40%, you have decades to recover. In retirement, time becomes fragile. Withdrawals often happen at the same moment markets are volatile. Losses hurt more because recovery windows shrink. I've watched retirees cling to speculative stocks, leveraged real estate, private deals, or complex financial products not because they fully understand them, but because those investments once worked. Past success creates emotional attachment, not future safety. I once met a man who invested $80,000 in a technology stock in the early 2000s. By 2021, it had grown to over $320,000. He was proud of it. He talked about it often. When the stock began declining in 2022, he held on, convinced it would rebound because it always had before. By the time he retired in 2024, that position was worth about $140,000. He needed the money for living expenses, but instead of selling from strength, he was forced to sell from weakness. What made it worse was this: he couldn't clearly explain the company's business model or financial health. He wasn't investing anymore, he was hoping. Retirement is not the stage of life to prove how clever you are. It's the stage to protect what already works. That doesn't mean eliminating growth entirely. It means shifting toward investments that produce steady income, preserve capital, and are easy to understand. If you can't explain why you own something without jargon, complexity, or vague optimism, that's a warning sign. I've seen retirees successfully transition by allocating part of their portfolio to dividend-paying stocks, high-quality bonds, and broad market index funds. One man I know moved 40% of his portfolio into income-generating assets while keeping the rest diversified for long-term growth. That balance gave him peace without sacrificing potential. The goal isn't to remove all risk, it's to remove risk you don't understand or can't afford. Action step: list every investment you own. For each one, write a single clear sentence. I own this because it provides income. I own this because it protects purchasing power. I own this because it diversifies risk. If you can't finish the sentence with confidence, it may be time to simplify.
Most people think retirement is about what you finally get to keep: the savings, the pension, the freedom from alarms and deadlines. But after watching retirement play out for decades, I've learned something far more important. Retirement is shaped less by what you accumulate and more by what you are willing to let go of at the right time. I've seen people retire with similar incomes, similar savings, and similar opportunities. One feels calm and flexible, able to adapt when life shifts. The other feels boxed in, anxious, constantly surprised by how quickly money feels tight. The difference is rarely how much they earned. It's the decisions they delayed or avoided years before retirement ever arrived. Retirement doesn't punish people who didn't make enough money. It punishes people who held on to the wrong things for too long. This isn't about fear or regret. It's about clarity. And clarity is one of the most valuable assets you can carry into the next chapter of life. Number 1. The home that no longer matches your life.
For many people, the family home represents success, stability, and decades of hard work. That attachment is understandable. But a home only remains an asset if it supports the life you are living now, not the life you lived 20 years ago. I've met retirees living in large homes filled with empty rooms, paying for space they rarely use. They cover property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, and repairs for a lifestyle that no longer exists. When asked why they stay, the answer is often emotional. We might need the space someday, but someday rarely arrives. I once knew a couple who kept a large suburban home long after their children had moved out. Between taxes, upkeep, and utilities, they were spending nearly $30,000 a year just to maintain it. At the same time, they worried constantly about cash flow and postponed experiences they actually wanted. When they finally sold and moved into a smaller, well-located home, everything changed. Their costs dropped, their stress disappeared, and the equity they freed up began working for them instead of sitting trapped in walls. Selling a home before health issues, mobility challenges, or market pressure force your hand puts you back in control. It allows you to choose simplicity, convenience, and comfort on your terms. This doesn't mean everyone should downsize. It means choosing intentionally. Fewer stairs, lower maintenance, closer access to healthcare and daily needs. A home should make retirement easier, not heavier. Number 2, investments you don't fully understand. Risk doesn't come from markets alone. It comes from owning things you don't truly understand. Earlier in life, time can forgive bad decisions. In retirement, mistakes become far more expensive. I've seen retirees cling to speculative stocks, complex financial products, or leveraged investments simply because they performed well in the past. Past success creates emotional attachment, but it does not guarantee future safety. One retiree I met had built a large position in a single technology stock. When it began falling, he held on, convinced it would recover. By the time he needed the money for living expenses, he was forced to sell at a loss. He wasn't investing anymore. He was hoping. Retirement isn't the time to prove how clever you are. It's the time to protect what already works. That doesn't mean eliminating growth. It means prioritizing investments that provide steady income, preserve capital, and are easy to explain. If you can't clearly explain why you own something, that confusion is a warning sign. 3. The habit of postponing decisions. Procrastination feels harmless when you're still working. There's always another paycheck coming. But as retirement approaches, delay becomes costly. I've watched people avoid planning because it feels overwhelming. They don't want to think about healthcare costs, taxes, or income timing. So they say, "I'll deal with it later." Later arrives faster than expected. One woman I knew retired assuming everything would simply work out. She hadn't calculated her healthcare costs, tax exposure, or withdrawal strategy. Within 2 years, she was back working part-time, not by choice, but out of necessity. Retirement doesn't organize itself. It rewards people who engage early, ask uncomfortable questions, and adjust while they still have options. Replacing avoidance with structure changes everything. Knowing your numbers reduces anxiety far more than guessing ever will. 4. The habits of spending that no longer bring real joy. While working, income hides inefficiency. In retirement, inefficiency becomes visible.
I've seen retirees keep expenses that made sense during busy careers but added little value afterward. Extra vehicles, unused subscriptions, convenience spending that had become routine. One couple sold a second car they rarely used and freed up nearly $17,000 a year. They redirected that money toward travel and family experiences. Their quality of life didn't shrink, it improved. The happiest retirees I know spend generously on what matters: health, relationships, experiences, and eliminate what doesn't. Retirement rewards simplicity. 5. The belief that your job is your identity. This may be the hardest thing to let go of. Many people are financially prepared for retirement, but emotionally unprepared. They don't miss the paycheck, they miss the structure, the respect, and the sense of purpose. When work disappears without something meaningful to replace it, retirement can feel empty. I've seen people rediscover fulfillment through mentoring, volunteering, teaching, or creative projects. Their value didn't disappear, it simply shifted. You are not your job title. Your worth doesn't expire when your career ends. Purpose in retirement doesn't happen by accident. It grows when it's planned. Final thought. Retirement isn't one decision. It's the result of many small choices made long before the pressure arrives. Letting go of what no longer serves you creates space, financially, emotionally, and mentally. Space to breathe, space to adapt, space to enjoy what you spent a lifetime building. The people who thrive in retirement aren't always the ones with the most money. They're the ones who had the courage to release the right things while they still had the power to choose. Take care of your future self. That investment never stops compounding.
Retirement isn't about reaching the end of work. It's about creating the space to finally live with intention. The choices you make before retirement matter far more than the ones you make after. Letting go at the right time gives you freedom, clarity, and control. Your future doesn't need perfection. It needs awareness, honesty, and a few brave decisions made early. Take care of your future self. They're depending on you more than you think.